Okay, so I guess the thing I want to talk about for this Reset podcast, which is, kind of spooky if you think about it, and that is simulation theory. Uh, all the top science, well, not all of them, but, a good deal of them, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon Musk, have kind of lent themselves to this theory in one way or another where they're saying, there's this quantum computer or some reason or another that that these programs are basically us. They made this existence that we live in, and we're all part of this simulation. We're just ones and zeros floating around in quantum space or whatever. And it kind of does weird me out a little bit. I mean, not to mention that. I mean, some people are like, well, why would a species that's trying to, we'll just say, like, build a simulation to get things like this going? Why? What would the purpose be of doing it? And I don't know. There's many theories, but the one that I think would probably be best suited to us, like, say if like it's mankind, it's humankind, far off in the future, maybe the year 3000, 4000, something like that, and all of their history has been sent to digital. Like, there's no history books anymore. There's no nothing like that to show what their ancestors did or how they lived. They just know basic things from stories or things like that. So what they did, this is the theory I'm coming up with, is that they made this simulation, and maybe there's something in our DNA like Assassin's Creed, and they can do genetic memories, or they have a basic understanding of how the genome works from generation to generation, and they basically constructed a model. Now, what this simulation that we're currently living in is probably doing for the future inhabitants is telling them a past that they don't know. A likely path that human beings have taken to get to the point where they are now. And I know that seems like, the whole simulation theory seems a little far-fetched to begin with. But, I mean, if you look at it, video games are, complex simulations. And yeah, none of this is real. I mean, the character I'm playing as in this game doesn't know anything. I mean, there's no consciousness to this being that I'm playing as right now. It's just animations and models and textures and shaders and all that working together to make me, the player, feel immersed into this world. But that's really apparent. Like, right now, it looks like this could be a living, breathing world. Like, this is could be somewhere somebody could live or whatever. But there's a channel on YouTube here that is called Boundary Break, and what they do is they take these ghost cameras and they go into these rocks and into that bus over there, and they could show you things that you can't see with the normal player camera. Now, you can't really do that in the real world, at least not in the same way you can in a video game, because in a video game, all this is just textures. There's just polygons and, collision detection, things like that are coming together to make this look real. And the real world doesn't have clipping. You can't phase through a wall. You can't duplicate items in the way you can in a video game, because of the way it's constructed. Now, things like clipping and things like that in these 3D games, I think, is going to become less and less apparent. You're going to have futuristic video games that just straight up don't have textures colliding with each other in the same way that they do in their current, iteration. I got a feeling that, like, in another 10, 20 30 years, it's going to be as drastic of a jump as, or as drastic of a jump. I'm already fumbling over my words because I'm trying to play the game and talk at the same time. But I think it'll be as drastic of a jump as, the NES to current day hardware. And, if this is the equivalent of NES in 30 years, then it's like, what will that look like? Will it be realistic? Probably. I mean, it's already close. You get, the general idea of what these textures are trying to represent. That's a bush, that's rock, that's tree. These are zombies. I'm a guy, shooting his gun, missing. We got this, general idea of what everything's supposed to be. But what if, and VR is already happening. I mean, what if, what, hold on a second. Who's to say that VR in 30 years won't be the standard? And you can't, go in there and, actually like run your hand against this wall right here and feel the texture. That you can't, rip that poster from the wall and tear it up in virtual space. I feel that that's something that's going to happen sooner or later. And, it gets to the point where it's like, well, if games get to the point of being indistinguishable from reality, then what will be the point of doing your normal day-to-day life? And that's where this theory starts to conflict with people's like ideology and all that. Is that you got a real life. I mean, obviously you can have kids and things like that in video games, but how real is too real? And if we make an artificial intelligence that is capable of feeling and thinking and has emotions and things like that, then we essentially created a being that in digital space, and it would be like cruel to do the things that we do to video game characters. I mean, one of the best examples is in like Super Mario 64. You pick up the penguin, you throw him off the cliff. You do that and you laugh because it's funny, because it's a 3D polygon, non-thinking, non-feeling character. There's no repercussions to that action. You're not hurting anything. It's not real. It's a fake thing in a fake game. But if you develop an AI that has the ability to think, feel, touch, and interact with you in the same way that a human does, and we'll say that that penguin now has the ability to look, feel, and interact with you like a real penguin. You can feel its feathers, you can smell its oily skin or whatever. I'm just saying is that it's just going to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more harder on you. It should. I mean, if you're a thinking, feeling, real human being, to drop a penguin off the side of a cliff, because that's the thing, is that you put on that helmet, it should be indistinguishable from the real thing here in the next couple years. And that brings us to the simulation theory, is that if these things have basically they're the equivalent of the real world thing, they can think and feel, then that world that they're in, that you're intruding on, is real to them. And these NPCs that have thoughts and feelings and lives when you're not around, you're intruding on them. You're changing the way that they think, feel, interact with the world. So who's to say that we right now playing this game, watching this video, living our day-to-day lives, aren't just some NPC in somebody else's video game? Who's to say that we're not that AI, that penguin that's getting dropped off the cliff? And that's what the simulation theory is talking about. And there's a really awesome movie that I think people should check out. It's called the Mandela effect. And yeah, it's just like it sounds, but the story is there's this guy who is at the beach with his wife and his daughter, and they are sitting there having a good time. She wants to go look for some seashells, and it's off screen, but they end up killing the daughter. I think she gets taken out by a riptide or something like that, and drags her out to the ocean. But it's never really explained exactly how she dies, just that she died. And basically this guy just starts to notice things that, like about 2 months pass, and he's starting to notice things like, the Berenstain Bears used to be the Berenstain Bears, and that Curious George had a tail, and, just all the regular things that, you see online with people, and the Mandela effect. And he goes to see this quantum scientist, and basically the scientist is like trying to get him to change his mind, or basically just leave it alone. But this guy, he's a video game coder, and I thought that was really cool because it's realistic. If this is a simulation, then he's a coder. He should be able to change code within the simulation. But anyway, there's quantum scientists and this guy. They go to the college where they built the world's first, quantum computer, and they said, well, we can create this code that is like basically replicates pi, and it's just infinite numbers replicating over and over and over and over again, and the computer will get overloaded. The quantum computer in the simulation will get overloaded, which will overload the outer world, the world that's not affected by the simulation, or the world that's running the simulation, will cause that machine to crash. And the guy's getting ready to do it and all, and he suddenly gets his daughter back. Like he walks into her room and boom, she's there laying in bed. The whole time you're thinking maybe this guy's just going crazy and all that. And his wife is like concerned about him, but he gets his daughter back. And so this simulation gave him back the one thing, the one thing that would have made him stop to stop trying to crash the simulation. The simulation gave back to him. And he goes to try and contact the scientist, the one that told him about the quantum computer and all that. And you find out that he took the place of this dude's daughter. Basically, he died 2 months ago, hanging himself. And it really seems out of character for him. But I mean, I guess that would be the case for anybody. Nobody seems like the kind of person that would hang themselves, I guess. But yeah, it's just really strange, like, then, and the simulation that this guy's living in, and he knows it's a simulation, starts to break down. Like, he's holding, like, cups and pottery, and it's starting to crack and fragment, and he's just like, what the hell's happening, because it's like two different realities are crashing into each other or something like that. It's a really good movie. But basically what happens at the end is that he's like, if this is a simulation, and obviously, he's a coder, he codes video games, he's like, well, then maybe I do need to crash the system because I need to reboot everything, and, maybe these errors will take care of themselves, because not only does he has his daughter back, but he wants to get, that doctor back, the scientist that showed him all this, he wants to fix everything, make everything right. And the weird thing is that, his wife is experiencing, like, I guess, like, fractured memories, because she starts waking up and having waking up from nightmares and all that, and she's acting weird, and then she starts saying to the daughter that she shouldn't be there, like, the daughter shouldn't be there. So she's kind of, like, starting to come to her senses, like, she's remembering that her daughter died, but she's also living in a world where she never died, so it's like her mental state is starting to break down. So this guy says like, all right, well, fuck it. I'm going to go to this quantum computer and I'm going to go through with my original plan, even though he got his daughter back and all, but he just still wants the answers. So he goes and puts in this custom written code into this quantum computer, and it starts infinitely calculating pi. And, you know, that's the best way I can describe it easily. I mean, it's a little bit more complex than that. And if you have like a coding background, or, you know, you have a basic understanding of how, you know, computer files work and shit like that, you'll understand a little bit better. But that's basically what he's doing, is he's making an, you know, infinitely replicating code that just, you know, this quantum computer gets overloaded and it shuts down. And so he uploads his code, and he goes out to the parking lot, and he notices there's no people around. You know, his car that he parked there that was in a full parking lot, the entire parking lot's empty, and he was only inside for 5 minutes. Even his car's gone. So it's like he's, you know, the system is already showing that it's starting to get taxed, and it's like he just put this code in. So he's riding the bus home trying to get back to his wife and daughter, because even though everything's not entirely real, he wants to be with them when the system crashes. And he is riding on a bus, and there's other people in there, and this woman goes to get off the bus, and she starts like clipping through the floor of the bus. And nobody else is noticing this stuff but him. And you think like maybe this guy's just going crazy. But his wife calls him, and she's like, well, I saw myself in the mirror, and, you know, there was two of me, and, you know, he's like trying to calm her down because he knows what's happening, but nobody else does. And he's gets off the bus, and like he turns one way, it's night, and turns the other way, it's back down to daytime, and, you know, it's just the system is starting to, you know, show its strain. You know, the leaves are changing different colors and shit, and he gets back to his wife, and, you know, he shows like two different moons or two planets crash into each other and off in the sky, and, you know, the whole system's just like glitching out, and his wife starts like basically trying to duplicate, or like her pixels that are holding her together are like starting to separate, and then she eventually comes back together, and then, you know, they all embrace, and the system crashes. And it's just a really good movie. Like, I already knew, like, basically, it's like, you know what's going to happen. Once he says that he wants to crash the system, you already know how the movie's going to end. I mean, at least anybody with forethought knows how that's going to end. I mean, the guy's just not going to stop, otherwise there wouldn't really be much of a movie. But, yeah, it's a really good movie. It's on the Hulu right now, I believe. And I think that's where I watched it last night. And it's just, it was I've always had the thought in my brain of this being a thing, you know, that we live in some form or another of a simulation. And that movie just gave the best physical representation of what I was thinking in my brain, you know, because it's just like, there are things that are really nuts. Like I didn't really believe in this Mandela effect thing, you know. At first, I was like, well, maybe people are just misremembering, but it's like massive amounts of people that are misremembering. Like, I remember Jiffy peanut butter, you know, with a Y, and apparently it's never been Jiffy. It's always Jif, you know. It's always been Jif. And that's really weird to me. I remember Jiffy, you know. I remember Curious George having a tail. Apparently he's never had a tail. You know, the Monopoly guy, I remember him having a monocle. Never had a monocle, you know. There was even in Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, he sees like this rich guy, and he's like, oh my god, you look like the Monopoly guy. And he has a top hat and glasses and a mustache and all that shit. And apparently, the guy's never had a monocle, ever, in any representation. And it's just shit like that is just crazy. And there's literally a bunch of different bunch of different ideas of this. Like I always thought that the Statue of Liberty was on Ellis Island, and apparently I'm not the only one. I mean, there's people that said they've taken photos of the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island, and then other people are like, no, it's always been on Liberty Island. It's on Liberty Island. That's where it is now. I mean, that's where it always has been, supposedly, in this reality. But it's just, strange, that people say, like, the statue was in one place in one reality, and now it's in another one. And it's like, basically, the best way I could describe why these things happen is like, say you take The Witcher 3, okay, and you have Geralt of Rivia. He has this badass sword that's 10,000 hit points. Every time he hits an enemy, it just decimates him, okay? Now you install a patch, and it makes that weapon that he's holding, that he's had in his possession probably his whole life or whatever, it's not 10,000 damage, but now it does 1,000 damage. Now, you upload that game, and if Geralt of Rivia was a real person, what would he be thinking? He'd be like, oh, well, suddenly the weapon that I've been carrying that used to decimate enemies no longer does anymore. It does, nowhere near as much damage. Now, see, to us, because we're outside observers, we know that there was a patch implemented, and it changed the attributes of that weapon. But to him, a being inside that simulation, nothing has changed other than now, well, this weapon, it degraded or it got old, or now it's malfunctioning or something. There's no real logical way of proving that, the weapon looks the same, it feels the same, it just doesn't do the same amount of damage. And you'd be like, well, why is that? And, oh, fuck. I gotta run, hang on. But, yeah, for a being that was inside that, simulation when that update happened, you wouldn't be able to explain other than, to people. You're like, hey, well, I had this sword. It decimated anybody and everybody that I made contact with. Now all of a sudden I hit somebody and it barely nicks them. And people will just be like, well, you're making it up, or you're making stories, and then you can have some witnesses. You're like, hey, I know I've seen this sword. He barely tapped people when he would decapitate them. And, it kind of grows this mythos, and that's kind of what that thing, where you got, one half of the population that thinks there's Jiffy peanut butter, and the other part that thinks it's just Jif. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about with this Mandela effect, that certain things can change, and we would be none the wiser, simply because we're inside a simulation that updates, then we're not able to see exactly what's going on. But, I don't know. It's a strange idea. I mean, I like to think that my life has more purpose than ones and zeros, but, you're never really going to find out. And a lot of people, for some reason, like, they seem to think like, hey, if you're inside of a simulation and you crash it, a lot of people are going to think that they're going to wake up like Neo in the Matrix and in some tub covered in gel, and they're going to be free or whatever. And it's like, well, hold on a second now, because if you were a part of that simulation, if you're ones and zeros, you're just a physical model of a person. Like, say, like a Grand Theft Auto NPC, and if you crash the game, you're just going to cease to exist. There is no waking up in a tub. If you're ones and zeros, you're just a part of that simulation, and that's kind of freaky to think about. I mean, but I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is that you are real to yourself, even if that simulation theory is real. You're as real as the world around you. You know, your life still has meaning and purpose, just as much as anybody else's. So I mean, it's a freaky theory to think about, and it's a fun theory to think about, because you know, if you think about it like a video game, like right now in this game, I'm playing with, you know, mods and cheats that, you know, I can have infinite weapon durability and extra strength and infinite health, and it'd be cool to be able to hack reality to get those things like that for yourself and in real life. And I guess the best game I can think of, and I don't know the name right off the bat, but it's like a hack sword. You know, it's like a USB stick, and you're able to like stick it into rocks and things like that, and change the physical attributes of that thing that you stick the USB into. It was a really cool game, and I think I'm gonna play it again. I just do not remember the name of it right now. But yeah, it was really cool. It's like it's supposed to be like a hack sword is what they call it, but it was a USB stick basically, and this character just can. It doesn't do any damage. It just changes like the physical attributes or whatever. You know, you're basically hacking the environment, and that'd be cool to have something like that in real life. And of course, you know, there is the other possibility that, you know, the simulation theory is just a crazy theory, and everything we do, say, and feel is actually real and always has been real. But yeah, as for that's my reasoning is if there ever was a simulation to, you know, if we are a part of a simulation, not saying we are, but if we are, I think the most logical reason why somebody would do that is like an ancestry simulator. You know, like if all the books got converted to digital, I mean, like there's companies right now just dumping their entire file system into digital backups, and wouldn't be strange to think that, you know, there would be no physical media or physical historical books to read, you know, 2,000, 3,000 years into the future. And then suddenly, if that gets hit with an EMP or some other kind of big catastrophic thing, and they lose all that data, then they have no records of history to work off of. So this species that's, you know, us, is super evolved and has a lot of technology, and they have quantum computing. The only way that they can rebuild that history is doing this simulation that we're currently in, or we could currently be in. And that is their modem or their model for their history. And it would be as simple as, you know, getting, you know, the basic starting point, because I mean it's basic knowledge of where human history started, and then the end point would be the point where they turned on the simulation. You know, how could a civilization get from point A to point B, basically, and they just let the simulation go, and then whatever happens in the simulation becomes their history. That could be one of many reasons, but I think that would probably be the most logical in my mind, anyway. I mean, like I said, we all could just be, if this is a simulation, we all could just be NPCs in some twisted kid's saved file in a game somewhere. I mean, it just depends on how crazy and, you know, how advanced procedural generation and things like that get in the future, that, you know, you could end up actually having simulated characters be so realistic because the quantum computer just deemed them, you know, that way. They just, it is a thing that this computer spits out a random bit of code. I mean, it would also explain why, you know, some people are, you know, they could be raised by good parents, great parents, and they can end up being, you know, absolute pieces of shit. And then you have the opposite, where you have someone who's raised by, you know, crappy parents, and they end up being, a really great person. So I mean, you're not necessarily a product of your environment. You're not destined to be one thing or another. You have control over your life. You have free will. I mean, it's not this simulation theory. Just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I would like to definitively have an answer. I mean, like if we ever got to the point where somebody was like, the simulation theory is no longer theory, it's actual fact, that would be pretty daunting. I mean, it would. I don't know, man. I would the simulation allow people to continue on? Would it allow civilization to continue if one day we found out that we were, in fact, a part of a simulation? Because right now it's this theory. It's just an idea, but ideas are dangerous. And I don't know, man. If you have something that is meant to be a model for something, how you get history, and suddenly it diverges from the path that you think it would be on because now the inhabitants in that simulation know that it's a simulation. Would you get the same results? And I don't know, man. It's crazy. It's a crazy idea, and like I said, I'm not saying that we are in a simulation, that we ain't real, but it would be crazy as hell to find out one day that, we're just a string of ones and zeros, and nothing that we really did in our lives mattered because it wasn't truly real. It was only real to us. So I guess the moral of all of this is to just not take life too seriously. Do things that make you happy. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And try and live the best life you possibly can. Because if it turns out that it's a simulation and we figure that out, and the powers that be that gave us the simulation here to work with doesn't want us knowing that it's a simulation, they may just hit the fucking reset button. Who knows? Who knows where all this is headed? That's I guess what is the overall point of this is that maybe it's not pointless necessarily, but it has as much meaning as you're willing to put into it. And that's kind of cool thing to think about. But yeah, I definitely want you guys, if you have Hulu, check out The Mandela Effect. It's a really good movie. I wouldn't watch it with someone who is faint of heart because it is kind of sad. It does involve the death of a person or of a little girl and all. So, I mean, it's just not probably for everybody, but video game players and gamers and things like that, it plays with some ideas that maybe floated around in your mind at one point in time or another. But anyway, this is where I'm going to end this podcast. I thank you all for joining me. Take care. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.